He was my first living boyfriend. I know it's kind of hard. How do you go about that, right? But to me, he was just John.
Hey everyone, JT Curtis here, and I recently attended an NYC screening of the new John Lennon documentary, The Lost Weekend, A Love Story.
My name is May Pang, and this is my story.
The Lost Weekend, the 18 months John Lennon was separated from Yoko Ono from 1973 to 1975, so yeah, not really a weekend, is told through the eyes of May Pang, who also narrates the film in a refreshingly honest, engaging manner.
Can you imagine? I was 23, and my first living boyfriend was John Lennon.
I don't think I need to tell you that John Lennon, well into his solo career, was one of the biggest stars on the planet, producing classics like Imagine and Power to the People, all while fighting against the establishment, and Yoko was Yoko. And through all of this, May was working as their personal assistant. In 1973, John and Yoko were having marital problems, and to put it bluntly, Yoko basically arranged for May to be John's girlfriend during their separation period. I mean, I've known about this story for years, and this still boggles my mind.
Well, are you kidding? I can't do that. He's my employer, he's my boss, he's your husband.
The film, of course, goes into great detail about this whole love triangle, along with John's more infamous stories in Los Angeles. But me being a big music nerd, I was also very interested in the details surrounding the creation of albums like Walls and Bridges, which included his first #1, Whatever Gets You Through the Night, and the rock and roll album produced by Phil Spector. And man, does she go into the details surrounding that recording fiasco. Overall, I really enjoyed this film. It visualizes May's narration with great archival footage, often letting John himself take over the narration. Julian Lennon also appears in the film. You're not going to hear wall-to-wall John Lennon music while watching this. I know quite well how difficult it can be securing the rights to these things. But the choice moments where they do play his music is well done and makes them even more powerful. The biggest crux I took away from this was what a prolific period this was for John, releasing 3 albums, producing Harry Nilsson's Pussycats, even reuniting for a jam with Paul McCartney, all with May's support. In the end, even though I know what ultimately happened, I didn't want John to go back to Yoko. I wanted John and May to stay together, release more music. I wanted them to meet up with Paul and Linda McCartney in New Orleans like they were supposed to. And immediately, I was playing my own mind games thinking what could have been. It's very rare when a documentary can get me emotionally involved like that. May herself did a Q&A at the screening at the Angelica Theater, not to be confused with Angelica Pickles, and I got the chance to speak with her afterwards. May very kindly joined me for an interview, and, well, I might as well let her continue her story. At the beginning, I was asking her how the screenings and ultimate reception was going.
When I met you at the Angelica, I came back from being out on the West Coast with the producers. I'm the only one that lives on the East Coast. Basically, they were all out there. So I went out there to join them and to see this film together in the big theater, because it was on Tribeca, but Tribeca only had it for home. We did it virtual. It was not in a theater. Half the people didn't understand how to make it work. They couldn't see it. And yet I found out later it was the most requested movie to be seen.
Nice.
Which was nice. And they kept it on. In fact, the first night that it premiered for Tribeca, we actually blew out their internet. So they had to come back to the producer and said, can we expand the bandwidth? It just knocked out the internet for that.
That's amazing.
I had people saying they saw it on their iPhone, iPad. When they told me iPhone, it was just sort of like going, oh my God, that's a tiny bit. And you saw it on the big screen. So it was never on the big screen.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Unless you had an 85-inch at your home, that was it, right?
Well, it's amazing how many people now, it's like especially younger people, it's like that's now how they watch everything is on their phones.
Yeah. And I know that when people have seen last year at Tribeca and they saw it, and then this year when they went to the theater because they really wanted to see it in a bigger form, they kept saying to me, did you add something to it? And I said, no, it's not been added. No additional. What you saw last year on your phone is what you're seeing on the screen. But as you know, if you see it on the screen, you can see how big you're missing so much when you see it in the tiny form,
Right.
So I encourage people to go out when this comes back out, and it will. There's some news coming up for towards the end of summer, beginning of fall. There will be some streaming noise. So yeah. So everybody should stay tuned for that.
Well, yeah, because actually one of my fan questions, Megan Lee, said, if I said that right, said, I'd like to know when the documentary will be available to watch in the UK, and if it's going to be streaming soon. So
there's that news that's coming, but you know where to find me. They can find me on my Facebook. I'll announce it on my webpage, which I'm always still working on because I don't know how to work my webpage. People put it together and I'm like, what? I thought it was going to be done sooner, but people don't understand this takes so much time to get to be put together. It's not like, oh yeah, we just put it on a streaming service and there it goes.
Right.
It goes on for months on end to figure it out. And then that's what happens. And I learned a lot in the process of this. I've gotten questions where people have said to me, oh, isn't it kind of weird that you're putting it out now? Because of certain circumstances that's happened, people find it interesting that I put it out. Like, for instance, and I will say it, where Yoko has said that, she's moved up to the country and she hadn't been feeling well. This had been in the works before any of this, and people don't realize it's taking time, and it's coincidence that things happen at the same time.
Right. I mean, you've also written about this quite a lot, and so
but you know what? But people don't get it. And there's a lot of people this time it reached, and people find it very interesting, and people pick out what they want to hear. People kept saying, "Oh, I know everything about your movie." Well, you don't. You really don't. There's still even lots more.
You actually brought up an interesting thing, because to be completely honest, and I was looking forward to the movie, but I did kind of go in like, oh, I know everything about the Beatles, I know everything about John Lennon, I've seen every documentary, but there really were a lot of really eye-opening moments in the movie. Wow, I didn't know this. Like, I mean, like his relationship with Paul, like I didn't really know that it was much closer than we were led to believe. And everything with Julian, I'm almost kind of curious, like when you were working on the film, like, wait till they see this. They're going to love this story right here or something like that.
Yeah, there were some. And I said, a lot of people think they know all the answers to my life. I love when they come back and they tell me, I know everything about you. And I said, I don't think so. They said, yeah, I do. I've read it. And there's still, even though the movie gave you a lot, there's still more behind it that I could not put in. People don't realize the movie was already in the actual content, not counting the credits and everything else at the end, is 90 minutes.
Oh yeah.
And then people kept saying, you didn't put enough in. I said, how could I put in certain things? You tell me. My whole life there's still a lot to go, but I can't give everything. I give you the most that I can give you to make you understand what went on in the background in my life.
Well, there was, I mean, just still so much. And it wasn't like when I was, looking at, because you talked about, why you want to see it on the big screen is because it is just, I love the movie because it's not just a bunch of talking heads. There's a narrative, your narration is very engaging. The way I can't even, just from an editor's perspective, I'm like, man, this must have been so difficult to organize all these interviews and these TV specials, and I mean, I think I kind of hinted at this at the screening. I'm like, was there any resistance from the Lennon estate about using some of his music, or?
No, everything was, whatever we've done, we had it legally looked at, because you don't want to step on something, that could be a landmine for anything. I know that some people, I've had friends that have put together some documentary as well. And they said they got people to say, oh yeah, we took care of everything. It's all above board. And when it came time to try and sell the movie for them, they didn't have all the paperwork done. We have what we call, our line producer is so good. There's certain people that they're so on it. and we have a book that's about 6 inches.
There's not a ton of John's music in there, but when it comes in, it's really powerful. Like, because you don't hear his music for a while, and then all of a sudden Imagine comes in, like, wow, this is so powerful.
The whole thing is that, as I saw one thing, one review, and they said, I didn't hear enough Lennon music. And someone else wrote back and said, if you want to listen to it, go listen and put it on a CD. This is not what the movie's about. The movie is about the explanation of my life and what my part in this, in his life. And it was what went on. And the music enhances what was needed at that moment. If you really do want to listen to John's music, it's there 24/7. Go home, put a CD or whatever, or stream it live.
Oh yeah, and even in my history of rock reviews, I get the same thing. It's like, well, why don't you just play the songs? One, I can't, copyright, and two, just go listen to the song. I'll give you 5 seconds. You bought the record
or stream it. Just
yeah,
no.
Well, actually, there was another question from Lost Detective, and I thought this was a good question. What kind of music was John listening to around the time, and did he have like a favorite artist or album?
Oh God, he was very open to listening to all different types of music. One of the things that did happen, and I'm not sure how many people picked up on it, but we had Tony King, who you saw, who was our Apple rep from England, and we would be listening to music, and he came in one day and he said, John, I got a great song. People don't know about this record. It had come into the chart like in the 90s, and then fell off. And it was I Can't Stand the Rain. And that song was so popular later on. But that's because whenever John would go onto the radio station, the first thing they would always ask, what are you listening to, like what you're doing now? And he said, I just got these couple of songs, and I Can't Stand the Rain is one of them. And there was another. And both that he kept plugging came back on the charts, and they made it to number 1.
That's amazing.
Yeah, the other one was Billy Swan, I Can Help, that one. So there were two different types of songs, but he loved the sound, and he kept plugging. And if you follow the history, it was off the charts. It was like only in the 99 or 98 and fell off, and he kept plugging and just kept coming back up until it reached number 1.
When you say 99 and 98,
that means in the top 100. Sorry.
Top 100. I see.
Yeah. So they're 98, 99, at least you would say I made it to the top 100, but it lasted all of a second, and then it was a blink of an eye, and then it started coming back. Yeah.
And it's interesting because Walls and Bridges, which I'm assuming that's the album, or at least one of the albums you had the most involvement with.
Yes, I'm involved with almost all those albums, but the thing is, that's my most that's the one I hold closest to me, because the least trauma of all of them, and the fastest album made for John. He did this whole thing from start to finish in 8 weeks.
Wow.
In those days was a miracle, and even to this day it's a miracle. When you hear people like the Eagles, it took them a year to make Hotel California or what, like, what? Right. A year. John couldn't handle a year. He wants it in and he wants it done, and that's it.
Yeah. That's amazing. And you are singing on Number 9 Dream. I was listening to it again. It's such a great tune.
Oh, thanks. I mean, I had no idea I was going to be doing those little voiceovers, and then also in the end he let me sing with him doing the background vocals, which was great. I had no idea that he wanted me to do this whispering. All of a sudden it's like I'm in another room and I'm doing all the catching up on the bills and stuff for the album, and I'm working it, and all of a sudden I hear the assistant come running in. John needs you. Why? You guys are doing whatever you're doing, overdubs. Why do you need me? Is there something wrong? Do we need another instrument? Do we need something that, for the studio? I come running in and I said, what? And before I walked in and I see the grin, and it's like a Cheshire cat's grin. And I see it, and I see the engineer, Roy Sakala, look, and they're both looking at me, and they go, and I said, and they're pointing out to the studio, and I said, yeah, I see a stand. I see the light just dim to just that area. And I see the headset. And he goes, I need you to go out there. And I said, why? Because I need you to go out there. You got to record something. And that's how it started.
That's amazing. And correct me if did they play it backwards on part of it?
Yes. The second half where I'm saying John actually comes back on the backwards.
Yes. I was listening.
Sounds like George, but it's Narj and it's really John.
Well, it's clearly some kind of hidden meaning about, the devil or something like that.
Of course it is. It's like everybody else that likes to put something. It's the backward thing. Yes.
Exactly. I may actually go through, because my history rock fans are always like, hey, when are you going to review all of John Lennon's solo albums? Because I did all of George's albums. And usually when I review them, I give an essential track. Do you have an essential track? Like if somebody said, I only have enough time to listen to one song in Walls and Bridges, which one would it be?
I guess it would be the one that I sing on. Either that or the one that he wrote for me, which is Surprise, Surprise, Sweet Bird of Paradox.
Yeah, I love in the movie how that kind of comes about, the whole way. And again, it's just another great choice of when we hear John singing and the demo, and it's just really beautiful. It's a beautiful demo too.
Thank you. I mean, it was so shocking to me, in the surprise, obviously, when he calls me in, he goes, I need you to hear something. And I'm thinking, okay, he's just gonna play something. And then he goes, I wrote this last night. And I'm hearing it and I went, oh my God, and I realized it's for me, it's about me. And it's like about us. And I'm like, oh my God, I would never have expected. I don't ask him to do any of those things. That was the one thing in our relationship. I would never say, you're going to write a song for me, or you're going to me, he was a guy that I lived with. He was my first living boyfriend. I know it's kind of hard. How do you go about that, right?
Right.
But to me, he was just John. He was the guy that I lived with. I would make dinner. I would take care of the work. We just do things together, take walks, take him on the bus ride, anything that I can. I would, when we go out to the Hamptons to visit friends, I did the driving. He just liked the fact that it's just the two of us, nobody else. Go grocery shopping out in the Hamptons, these little general store. He loved all that. He would go in and start looking. He was your best consumer in that sense. You like to go in and goes, oh, I could use this, and he pulled it down, and I like this, and let's try this, and even at different stores to go shopping, he was the best on that.
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's like I think there's a misconception that during this time, people think of like him, being drunk with a Kotex pad on his head and stuff like that. And I think, and I think that's the only image they have from this time. But you presented that, he was a man, he'd had his ups and downs, and like anybody else.
Well, you know what it is when you're hanging out with the boys, and I'm sure, when you have your quote friends with you, and you go out and have a night out, you're rowdy, you get rowdy, and that's what happens. And you get a bunch of guys that are always, Harry Nilsson was the most mischievous person in that group, and he loved to create havoc, and that's what he did. Right. But the one who got the press was obviously John, because if you say Harry Nilsson, they go, okay, fine. If you say John Lennon, well, hold on, that's more front page news. And if you think about it, if you keep reading, but you read about the same incident over and over again, there's like 2 or 3 of the same thing. So they stretched it out for the full 18 months. And that's not exactly how it happened. And I used to get a little annoyed and pissed off about when they kept writing. I said, oh, they keep bringing in something that was months before, and they keep bringing that back in. So it just sounds like he did that for the full 18 months. And that's not what happened.
Yeah, I imagine it must have been kind of a shock to, you're the personal secretary for John and Yoko, and now all of a sudden you're arm in arm with him at all these events and just, press taking, so many photos and everything. Well,
they had a hard time finding stuff on me because I would always fall into the background. I knew what was happening, and I would duck. I didn't want to be in the front all the time. So people are having a hard time finding a lot of footage on me. And I saw things in there when they found it. I was really surprised when I saw the film, because I did not want to see the film till they put it together, because I didn't want to be that hands-on person, when you're micromanaging someone and you go, oh my God, and they go, this person can't leave me alone. I don't like the way my hair looks. Like, you just don't know. And I said, I'll take whatever you come up with. I'll look at it, unless it's something really that I object to. I'll leave it to you guys as the filmmakers. And one of them was the archivist. And we went through, the one thing that we did do though was we went through the timelines, we went through everything with me. So we have everything straight. So it was not like I was there every day. I didn't know what was in there. I did not have a clue of what they had put together.
I was going to say, is that one of the reasons you waited to show yourself talking on camera until the very, very end? Spoiler alert.
It was their idea more than, and I had no idea what I didn't even realize that I was going to be the narrative person, doing this narration. I had no idea. I was doing it. I was doing some of the narrative in draft, like a draft form, right? And I thought, it's whoever's going to be doing it, it'll be great. I was just filling in. I did not realize I was going to be the one to end up doing it.
Yeah, I don't know that it would have worked if it was another person narrating it, because I think your voice really, like there's just so many, like those, like, can you believe this? It's just like, it's such a personal touch,
I know. It was, so they showed me the movie just before I did the narration. I said, I think you better show it to me, because I'm saying it, and there were times when they would say it and I go, okay, what part am I saying this to? Because I wouldn't have a clue. When I had to redo the script, I now had a visual then I can emote a little bit more to the scene, what we were talking about.
There was one story, I don't think it was as much in the film, but I was curious about this, being, the guy who was so into George and everything. I think I had read a while back that him and John kind of had a hard time, like especially, I think you tell a story about, was it his 74 tour?
Yeah, the Dark Horse tour. We found that they were in town, and also the Apple meetings were going on, and we went over to see George, and John hadn't seen him in years at that point. At least maybe 3 years, 2 to 3 years already. It was very emotional. And I could see there was a buildup of what the feeling of George to John, which John later explained. He goes, George was always like my younger brother. He followed me everywhere. And I just remember George going, where were you when I needed you? And I'm sitting there. There was a couple of people else in the room, and we're all like, okay. And I'm sitting close like this, thinking, oh God, John, please, don't get upset. You don't have a right to be upset. These people have been looking for you. They're, where have you been? And John just calmly said, he goes, I couldn't be there, but I'm here now for you. And it was, I took a deep breath, and I'm sitting on the side, and then he goes, there was at one point, he goes, I want to see your eyes. And he said, so John took off his sunglasses. People don't realize, that's the other thing. People don't realize when there's these pictures of John and he looks like he's in a fighting mode because people are coming at him. He can't see beyond this far when he doesn't have his glasses on. But people don't have an understanding that if you're in the dark and people are taking flash photographs of you back in the day, a lot of flash, you can't see anything in the dark except flash. And if somebody's coming at you, you're thinking they're going to attack you because you don't know who they are. You can't see them. So he took off his sunglasses and he put on a pair of glasses, his normal glasses. And of course, his normal glasses are also tinted. So he couldn't see his eyes. And I see George getting a little irritated on that one. And he just reached over and he grabbed him and took it right off his face. And I just sort of like, oh. And everybody, the room got really tense a little. And he leaned into John and he says, I just want to see your eyes. And they went nose to nose with each other. And he goes, can you see them now? And he said, yeah, I just wanted to see you, And so he goes, and then he looked at me and he goes, I'm glad you're with him. And then he goes to John, I'm glad you're with her.
Wow.
And everything, it broke the ice on a lot of things, and everything was fine. Now, we lived in the city. We weren't living far away from the hotel. He wouldn't let us go home because he turned to the guy in the room. He says, get him a room. And I was like, oh, we're staying, obviously. So it was kind of interesting. And John said, if you need my help, I'll be there for you. Meaning if you're going on stage and you need because the tour wasn't doing very well. So right. John said, I'll come out and help you. And we went out to see what the show was like. We got on the bus with them and we went out to Long Island, and we were standing in the wings to watch the show. And a few fans leaned down and saw us, and they were, oh, it's John. They all didn't. So we just sort of moved back in, So
right. Yeah. And did they kind of like after that, it's like, all right, we got it out, we're okay now, or
we were fine. Now, what happened after I left the scene, as it were, that's something else. I'm not there for that. Meaning, I don't know what happened. Did they talk? Did they whatever? I wasn't there. I tried to always keep John in touch with, quote, the family.
Right.
That was always my thing. First off, he grew up with these guys. He grew up, there's his son. That was just as important for Julian. I wanted him to be part of his life. And I wanted the closure that he didn't get, that he and Cynthia did not get when they broke apart. So I managed to get that off the table as well. So, there were different things I tried to do in that short time frame, according to people. It's not a weekend.
So I think that's probably one of the most heartwarming moments of the movie is how him and Julian were able to come, pardon the pun, come together again after all that time.
I think it was important. I know what it's like not having your family there, or especially when one of your parents should be there and everybody loves you, but all of a sudden you're not in touch with your son or your daughter. You got to think, what is it? It doesn't make sense. He was at that age. He was 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He needed his father, and that was important.
In the event that I eventually do go through all his albums, what are some, if you were to go through his discography, especially the ones you were involved with, what are some other songs that you just listen and go, that's such a great song off of Mind Games or Sometime in New York or something like that?
Mind Games had a few. I mean, when we were doing it, I was listening to Mind Games. I Out the Blue. There's certain songs that you listen to and you go, oh my goodness. And then I heard a song that I didn't know about, which was I forgot what album it came off. It was much later, like A Shaved Fish or what else? No, Milk and Honey. Sorry, it was Milk and Honey, where it was Forgive Me, Oh Flower Princess. And I said, oh my goodness, I think it's about moi, because just the wording, just his few words, just the way he wrote the song, it sounds more, it's for me, and I got it, so there's all these little hidden messages that I get.
I think on that same album he talks about there's UFOs over New York, and nobody
and
told
we
me
saw that, and I don't care what anybody else says. Since you realize my choice of drink was Coca-Cola, I did not drink. I did not take liquor, and I did not take drugs. And when I came out, and I remember being on that to this day, just walking out onto a balcony and looked up and I went, oh my God, I said, what is that? And he goes, you're seeing what I'm seeing. I said, oh my goodness. And you couldn't miss it. You just knew whoever was around. And it was a Friday evening, which in New York City in August, which is the biggest, everybody goes out to the Hamptons or they're away. I was screaming, it's an effing UFO, and not one person heard me. I mean, my neighbor could just come out. They were gone for the weekend. I looked across the street. all the lights are dark. So I said, well, nobody's here. And I'm screaming.
So I feel like nowadays somebody would have an iPhone nowadays.
Well, I tried to take a photograph. Unfortunately, it looked like my film had been processed. And so it became all blanked out. I know there's a description somewhere, a film where John described it, and that's exactly what we saw. We watched it for a good, maybe solid 10 minutes because it took its time. It would speed up. It went sideways. We're standing there going, what is this? And yet I could hear the street noise below me. I could hear the helicopter across the river, but it was dark enough that you could think it was something else.
And I mean, you did like so many things. Like I know you worked on I think you worked with like Bob Marley and a couple other people, right?
Well, you know what it was? I worked at Island Records, and I also worked, and so I was helping with whatever to get that record out with Robert Palmer. What was it? The one with Brian Eno with all the New York City punk bands that were out at the time. I was always on the edge of everything, including there was a guy named Gary Kerfers who worked in the office, and I met Talking Heads as they were getting signed. So I was right at the beginning of a lot of these things. And I also worked for United Artists Publishing, where I got songs to other people. And I got one of my songwriters who was a Christian writer, basically. And I said, I can't work with your songs. Nobody's going to take your song to record them. And he goes, what would you like? I said, so I gave him a parameter, how I wanted a song to sound. He came back. He is such a prolific writer. He came back 3 hours later. I managed to get the song covered by Judas Priest.
Wow.
So I turned a Christian writer into a heavy metal writer. So there you go. And it was the only outside song, too. It was on the Screaming for Vengeance album, I believe.
Wow. How do you go from Christian rock to Judas Priest?
That's why he was a good writer. He listened to what I said.
What was his name again?
Bob Halligan.
Bob Halligan.
So it's the only outside song on that album, and it's called Take These Chains. And the first person that wanted to cut it was actually not Judas Priest, but the first one was John Waite when he first heard it, when I played it for him. But it took too long. He wanted to change certain things. And I said, wait a minute, I got to get the song out because I think it's a great song. So I got it to Judas Priest, which was perfect.
May, thank you so much for talking with me. What's next on the schedule for the film?
Oh, the film, like I said, it will be towards the end of summer. There'll be some news on streaming. And the other thing is I'm out and about with my photo exhibition, and they should check out rockartshow.com, and they can see where I'm appearing with the photographs to be purchased.
Well, May, thank you so much again. Best of luck with the film. Everybody go see it. And I think that'll just about do it. Thank you so much, May. Appreciate it.
Thank you, JT. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, May, and I do really recommend seeing the film. The Lost Weekend, A Love Story, gets a goldfish from me, and follow May Pang for updates on when it's playing at a theater near you. And if you're a fan of John Lennon or a fan of the Beatles, you'll definitely enjoy this one.